Hi all, welcome. This is episode 60. Tonight we're looking forward to a great variety of topics. Don't have a guest, we've just got Oscar and I on TV. He's Oscar D'Souza. And tonight we're going to, Oscar's really keen about discussing interest rates, plenty of chatter about interest rates, so we thought we want to have a bit of a chat about that. The investment market, WA, remember this is all about WA, and so we want to look at the investment market and see where that's going and what is it doing. We've had a chat. Oscar's been out exploring and talking to a few of his pals in the real estate market, so we're going to find out a little bit more about that. And stamp duty, it keeps on coming up. Again, OD's keen. He's enthusiastic this week, so we're going to have a chat about that. I've also got some really interesting figures that came to hand via the industry that I'm in is conveyancing. So got some interesting stats associated with the property market, which gives us a bit of an insight of what's going on. We all know how I like my stats. An article the other day about house price booms rippling out to the regions. Now, when you read further, once again, that was not necessarily WA. It was talking about Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria. But where's that in the scheme of things when it comes to WA? Is our regional areas, is the ripple effect happening with regard to the property market? So we'll talk about that. A tree change. Interesting that I read another article, anybody think that's all overdue, but I had a look, there was an article about towns in Australia, and Geraldton was the WA choice in all the different states. They identified different places, and Geraldton was the place that was identified for WA as being a tree change. But are there people looking at WA as a tree change, considering lockdowns and everything that's going on? And the turnaround, it's interesting. Remember at the beginning of the year, and certainly OD and I were talking about the property market and where it was heading in WA. We were going to lead the pack, but WA appears to be lagging at this stage with regard to booming house prices. Still going well, but in the scheme of things, when you compare us with the rest of it, the only sort of state that's sort of behind WA at the moment is, in fact, Melbourne. So we'll talk about that. We've got a couple of questions to ask. Now, I haven't even told you this, OD, but I've even got, I think we're definitely going to talk a little bit about sport, but gardening. I've got a little gardening piece I'd like to tell you about.
Gardening?
Yep, it's probably related.
There's no room for gardening on our highly intellectual show.
It's about property, don't you worry. But I also like this story. We always like to look for little headlines. I love the story. Well, when I say I love the story, it's a bit of a sad story in some ways. But the 21-year chaos that's going on with the people that here in WA and someone in the neighbourhood that's anonymous, and it was an interesting little article, and I think we might just have a chat about that. And I've got a great if question. You'll love my if question. Can't wait.
Yeah,
mate, how are you? How was the week? How was the week?
Mate, I'm really good. Mate. What can I say? Look, there's lots going on in our local real estate market and sport. I'm glad that we're actually going to touch on sport. In fact, I almost want to kick off with sport because there's been a lot happening just in the last 3 or 4 days. So there's lots for us to talk about in sport. Do you want to do the disclaimer? Get the disclaimer out of the way, because you always forget to do that and you always cock it up as well. But maybe if you quickly get that done.
You just like it because I stumble every now and then. Okay, the general advice disclaimer. Remembering we've got a podcast available every Wednesday, so those that don't get to see the show and our live stream every Tuesday, 7:45, then the option you've got is listening to our podcast, and we'd love you to share that out to people and let people know it's happening. And then, of course, you can get access to us and send questions to us via our live chat line, or you can also go via Instagram or our Facebook page, or what else have we got? Twitter. We've got a Twitter account. So there's a few options that you've got there if you've got any questions. And we'd really encourage you, whether you get them on tonight's show or we have them for the next episode. This is now episode 60. So we'd really encourage you to do that. And we don't care how silly or how you don't have to put your name to it. Even if you just call your Christian name, no one knows who Jack is. We really enjoy those questions being sent through to us because I think they don't only benefit the person that's asking the question, but there's lots of people that listen and watch this show. And we who knows, they may be wanting to ask the same question but not sure how to go about it. The general advice disclaimer is that the information of this podcast will be regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. And we always advise and recommend, very good, Tony. We always advise and recommend you seek personal, professional and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property and investment decisions. And we cannot emphasize that enough. Ultra important that you get independent assistance for your own views. And as I keep reminding people, I've had a number of situations occurring as recently as today where people are asking about situations. Anyway, the week ahead, I've had to talk about sport because bang on, how good was Saturday in the tennis? Did you get emotional? Did you get caught up in it all?
Yeah, I did when that last shot by Svenska went straight into the net, and that gave Ash Barty the championship. So yeah, I did. I think it was all about her, though. It wasn't about, for me, it wasn't about being Australian. It wasn't about the crowd or anything. It was this literally lifelong dream that, and that whole thing about resilience and working towards something and determination and all those great things that I think really emulate exactly who Ash Barty is. And to see it actually happen then and there on the court was just an amazing thing to watch for her personally. For Australians, obviously for Australians. But the other thing I was going to say is, I think I just forgot. Oh, how humble she is. She's just one of the most humble people for someone that's achieved what she's achieved, an amazingly humble person. And she's an absolute example for not just sports people, but really for people all around the world. So no, it was fantastic.
I thought it was fantastic, and I got very caught up in it. And my wife she's been playing tennis for the last 2 weeks, so she's got a sore shoulder and she's very tired because she's been up every night. She just loves the tennis. But you know what? I think the forgotten bit is Dylan Alcott. How you talk about resilience, you talk about, challenges, you talk about being humble. Here's a young man in a wheelchair who's gone and achieved. That was his 14th Grand Slam. And all credit to Ash, and she deserves the headlines. But wow, I really sort of excited for Dylan. I've listened to his podcast. I've listened to him on radio, and I've listened to his story. And you talk about resilience, and you talk about someone who's 14 slams. If he's going to the Olympics, and if he wins the US Open, so he's won the French, he's won the Australian, he's won Wimbledon this year. If he wins the Olympics and he wins the US Open, he's won what they call the Golden Slam. I mean, that is sensational, absolutely sensational. And I think it was actually the Paralympics they refer to it as, don't they? Not the Olympics, but even so. And then, of course, the football's been turned on its ear, and the old West Coast Eagles last night, mate, seriously. That was a bit of a concern.
That was almost going to be my if question for you. But before we do that, for those that are listening, watching, we are about to talk some real estate. We are about to talk some WA real estate because that's obviously what the show is. But there's just been a lot happening in Australian sport and in WA sport. And so TV, you've segued into it, or you've jumped the gun, as you occasionally do. And so my if question to you, even though it's not your team, my if question to you was going to be, and I encourage anyone who's watching, if anyone's got any comments or thoughts or maybe an answer to my question, feel free to chime in. TV, my question to you is, if you were Adam Simpson at training today, what would have been the flavour of what you would have delivered to your players after yesterday?
The flavour?
Yeah. So what would it, what would it? I
suppose as a coach, and I've done a bit of coaching in my time. As a coach, I probably would have got down to the point of sitting down. I probably wouldn't beat the living daylights out of them. I think the fact I think the observation from TV perspective, as a TV observer, was there seemed to be a little bit of frustration amongst the players on the field. There was some aggro and some ill discipline that I thought destroyed it. And I compared that game to the last. I happened to go out on Sunday with a mate of mine, and I saw the Collingwood Tigers, the last 20 minutes, and Collingwood were 20 points down, and suddenly they just flowed. They just took risks and they made a go. And I think that's what I'd be saying to the players. Guys, there's no right or wrong. Go out there and play the game. I feel as though they don't know what they're going to do next. They feel like as an observer an outsider looking in, as though they are concerned about making mistakes. And that's, I'd be tempting into them. Yep.
But I want to bring you back to the question, though, because I really want to know as a coach. I mean, I think you started with, as a coach, this is what I'd say, but then you more so summarised where the West Coast Eagles are at and maybe what their future game plan, might be for next week. What I'm referring to is you've got a bunch of 20 players there that for the last couple of weeks, they haven't been ordinary. They've been a bit worse than ordinary. And this is actually a really good side. They've got some amazing talent, some absolute superstars, but something's not right in the camp at the moment. How do you pull your team of champions? How do you pull them out of this slump and get them not focused on what happened yesterday, not focused on what happened last week? There's still a hangover from that. How do you get them focused on their strengths and what they've got in front of them for the next 6 days in preparation for the next game? There's a lot of backlash. There's a lot of people.
Can I think about it? Give me a minute to think about it, because it's a good question. It's a good question, and I have been involved in that sort of, not as high profile as this, but I have been involved where trying to get those players all back on the same page and get your good players back performing. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Going hard, is it one of these things where you try and slap them out of it and come on, guys, put that behind you and all that? Or is it? I reckon he's probably
already done that. I think it's more a case of getting the guys together and getting away from the football. Maybe it's, I don't know. There's a lot going on with these guys, and this is a different environment now. I read an article today, was it, or somewhere, with all these teams and their partners being away. They don't know whether they're going to be here next week or there. They've got young children, in fact, babies, So I think all those things have got to play a part, and I suppose it's more, I don't know, maybe it's not the coach that steps in, maybe it's the sports psychologist that steps in to get involved in what's going on rather than the coach, because he's probably feeling the challenge as well. So it's interesting. It's interesting. And the other part,
stay in the sport.
Well, I am, but I'm going to mention, how I love golf. You talk about West Australians. Min Woo Lee won the Scottish Open for the golf as well on the weekend on a playoff hole. He birdied the playoff hole to win, and so very exciting. Wow. Yeah, house-wise, property-wise in WA, being, we talk about sport, how exciting that is. We could talk about that on its own, but lots and lots and lots of things happening. But why not just do what we normally do and give me your stats and give me your thoughts? What do you reckon?
Yeah. All right, so I'll give you a quick rundown as to our Perth market, exactly where it sits, what's been happening over the last week, as we always do. So for the week closing Friday, the Friday just before the weekend, another 813 sales for the week. That includes houses, units and land as well. Very, very consistent. There wasn't a drop-off for that lockdown week that we had, and there's also not a drop-off for the week after that either. So, if we're doing 800 to 1,000 sales every week, it's a very, very strong market. There's still the real estate agents that are reporting that things seem to have dropped off a little bit. There's not as many buyers, or maybe there's not as many offers coming in. But the bottom line is that the stats don't lie, TV, that the transactions are definitely there. And again, we're a bit over 800 sales. 12 months ago, same week, 12 months ago, we were almost bang on that. It was just under 800. So still a very, very consistent level of activity. Interestingly, listings are down a little bit. So 4 weeks ago, there was just over 9,000. There was 9,016 listings available through Perth. And as at today, there's 8,558, which is basically, in a 4-week period, it's a 5% drop. Now, it's a bit of an interesting time in the market for us actually to see a decline in the amount of stock. Typically, as we move into winter, often things do slow up a bit. the weather of the last 10 days, not many people want to get out and look at houses and buy houses. So winter, normally things slow up, but the stats haven't shown that. If anything, it's actually shown that there's, a bit more of a shortage of property just over the last month. And then we do also prepare for what's known as the spring selling season, which kicks off basically by the end of August or really into September and October. So yeah, we're 5% down on stock from where we were a month ago. And interestingly, from where we were 12 months ago, we're 17.5% down. So 12 months ago, there was about 10,500 listings available. So still a good amount, but we knew we had lots of buyers. And then we've had a massive drop in listings, which is down 17.5% from where we were 12 months ago. On the rental side of things, we are actually seeing a bit of a shift in the market. So irrespective of what the real estate agents are saying, or rather the property managers are saying, this week gone, there was only 562 properties leased. Normally that figure is anywhere from 700 to 800. So 562 rentals leased is quite a drop. This time 12 months ago, it was 874. So there really is a bit of a drop in the leasing activity. That said, I am one of the property managers on the ground, and on the weekend I had a home open, the first and only home open for this particular property. I had 40 people through, about 19 groups, but 40 people in total. I received 16 applications, of which half of them were really, really good quality applications. And in the end, the property leased to the best application and got over what the asking price was as well. And I can tell you there's a lot of disappointed people with real, genuine stories about they just don't have any time left in their current accommodation. Either the property that they're in has been sold, they've sold their own property and now need rental accommodation, or their lease is up and they just need to find alternative accommodation. So the whole idea of homelessness and that rental stress, it's definitely still a problem out there. We're still hearing about it in the media, but me as a property manager, I'm literally seeing it on the ground. In terms of listings, so there's the stats for rentals are a little bit unusual, I guess, because I'm finding that the demand is still really strong, but we're not leasing as many properties. And in fact, for the first time in easily 6 months, the rental stock has gone above 3,000 properties. For so long, it's been anywhere between 2,500 up to 2,800. But for the first time in a long time, I've actually seen it go above 3,000 properties, which means our vacancy rate's probably something like 1.2 to 1.3%, as opposed to 1% where it has been sitting. So that said, compared to where we were 12 months ago, we're still 24% down on the stock of where we were at 12 months ago. So basically 12 months ago, we had around about 4,000 or just under 4,000 available rentals. And as at today, we've got just over 3,000. Finally, in terms of Geraldton, we always check in on our friends in Geraldton. Currently, right now, if you're looking for a rental in Geraldton, there's 64 properties available, which again, that is a little bit... Yeah, it actually has gone up. It did get down to about 42 or 43. Yeah. We've seen it creep up a little bit over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it's right now sitting at 64. It's by no means oversupplied. It's good to know that there's a little bit more selection in Geraldton for people that are looking to rent. That said, if you ask any renters out there in Geraldton, there's practically nothing available. They put in applications, good applications. There's just not enough supply of rental properties in Geraldton. So still quite similar conditions to what we've got down here in Perth. And that's my wrap.
Do you know what it's like in the southwest? Is it similar down there?
Yeah, exactly the same, mate. In fact, I haven't looked in the southwest probably in the last couple of months. So what I do know, a couple of months ago, the conditions was very, very similar to the Perth metropolitan area and the Midwest, as in there's just a massive, massive shortage of supply, but really, really high demand. I doubt that much has actually changed down there. Maybe there's been a slight spike in supply, just like what we've seen in Geraldton. But that's a good question. I'll do some research and I'll come back to you with some outcomes next week.
That would be really good if you did some research. That'd be something special. Hey,
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not.
no, I will jump the gun a bit considering you're doing stats. I got some information we get access to, obviously, in my profession, and our representative body, which I must ask Dion if we can get him back on again sometime, our CEO for the Australian Institute of Conveyance of WA. But to give you an idea of what you're talking about, the June activity, the EASs, so they're the inquiries we do on when you get a contract, and that's a buying and selling contract. You do you lodge what they call an inquiry with the local council, etc. That goes via Landgate. That's down 5.9% on May. So this is WA. This is all the transactions in WA. The transfers are up 2.7% on May. But in the scheme of things, what you've got to look at, the way I see that with those figures, remembering your contracts for May are your settlements for June and July.
Yeah.
So therefore, your transactions, your transfers that are being registered through Landgate in June, July are probably going to be your contracts for May, April, May.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. New strata lots are down 32% on May.
Wow.
New subdivisional lots are up 44% from May. And the total lodgements are up 5.7% on May. So lodgements are documents going through Landgate, be it transfers and various mortgages and all those sort of documents. Mortgages are up 9.6% on May. And then the activity in comparison to this time last year, EASs are up 77% as the same time last year. Right? So inquiries. So you can understand why settlement agents and lawyers, settlement agents in particular, are absolutely bursting at the seams and are under pressure. And we always talk about being patient and being careful. That's another thing I'll talk to you about in a minute too. Transfers are up 89% on the same time last year. New strata lots are up 13% compared to this time last year. New subdivisional lots are up 50%. Total lodgements, so documents going through the system, are up 60%. And mortgages are up 78% on the same time last year.
All
so how
WA.
are those? That's WA. That is only WA. So that gives you an idea for those people who are wondering how the market's going. The market is booming, is bursting at its seams. And when you talk to people in the industry, I mean, you're in new business. You've started your new business relatively early, recently. Dedicated property management. And as you said, I saw that post the other day that you showed and people just rocking up, and I thought, wow, it's quite staggering. So we talk about the sting going out of the market, but WA is still flying.
So let's segue into one of the other articles you read, and you do read a lot of articles. In fact, I think it's very cute that the old man reads the articles still. But so one of the other articles that you mentioned was that WA is lagging so far as the annual growth rate in comparison to the other capital cities in Australia.
Yep. So go on.
It's a bit of a hard headline to hear on the back of those stats that you've just given us.
Well, it is, but this is talking about, when we're talking about lagging, it's not lagging in what we're doing. It's lagging with regard to our values. So in comparison, where we were talking at one stage, don't forget this time last year there was talk about the property market was going to be value is going to drop by 30% and the world was going to fall apart. Then WA started progressing and the rest of the country was not. And then slowly the New South Wales, Victoria's still struggling. Well, not struggling, but Victoria hasn't quite achieved. And it'll be interesting to observe what New South Wales does now with their lockdown. And obviously that's going to continue for a bit longer than they were first expecting. In fact, I heard the other day, there was even a suggestion that this lockdown that New South Wales are experiencing could not be weeks, but could be months. Now, that in itself could have a massive impact on their property market. But it could have it also could have put further pressure on the WA market.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Well, what we've even just before, around about a month before the first lockdown in Sydney, a very well-known auctioneer and real estate coach, a bloke by the name of Tom Panos. He actually he calls auctions every Saturday, and he calls anywhere between 8 and 12 auctions on a Saturday. So like he'd have a very sore mouth and voice box by the end of the Saturday. But and that's just the way that they sell property. Yeah, because he talks the whole day, and he's calling auctions the whole day. Anyway, that's just the way that they sell properties over there. And he basically does a bit of a summary on a Sunday night as to what happened in the activity. And he said probably about a month ago that sellers, or vendors as he calls them, but sellers, be aware, we're not smashing what's it called? Oh, sorry, I just had a memory blank. We're not smashing reserve prices anymore. We're not getting an extra 20,000, or every sale in the streets not going up by 50,000 anymore. The Sydney market really has hit its peak, and things are actually starting to come off a little bit. And this was a month before Sydney went into lockdown. So there's no doubt with this extended period of lockdown, you just can't get people through properties the way that you could before. Are people prepared to part with, bearing in mind they're parting with much bigger sums of money than what they would than over here in WA. If you spend 500 in WA, you're spending $1 million over there. If you spend 900 over here in WA, you're probably spending 1.7 or 1.8 over there. So I don't know about UTV, but if I'm spending 500, that's one level of risk in terms of buying something without seeing it. But if I'm spending $1 million, I want to be having a look at it and touching it and feeling it. And if you can't do that during a lockdown, which is what they can't do at the moment, then surely that's got to put a pretty big handbrake on their market.
Well, this information I got with regard to WA lagging, that came from I get an email from CoreLogic.
Yeah,
and so they were assessing on the home value, and so WA house prices grew 1.9% last month, taking the increase to 9.8%, which is an exception.
9.8% for 12 months?
Yes.
No, it can't be 12 months.
Taking the full year increase to 9.8%, they're saying. And they're saying that is after years of subdued prices.
When you say full year, though, when you say full year, do you mean the full year of 2021? So we're talking 6 months. We're not talking a full 12 months, though.
This is Australian residential property post the highest annual growth rate since 2004, and the Australian residential property prices rose 13.55% over the past financial year, the highest annual growth rate since 2004, when the market was unwinding from the housing boom of the early 2000s. They don't specifically over the year house prices nationally rose 15.6%, and they have made mention of the fact that where was it? Hobart was 19.6%, and Darwin was the highest annual rate in dwelling values, increased by 21%.
And Perth?
It's not specific about Perth. They referred to WA, and that's what I always get with regard to that. It doesn't give me specific figures on Perth alone. It refers to WA as a whole.
Right. Okay. And what figure was that? 10, 12 point something?
9.8. Yep.
That's surprising.
That's housing prices.
Yeah.
That's housing prices.
I just can't believe that that's not in double digits for a 12-month period.
I was surprised because considering where we were talking and where the banks were talking about values here in WA, and considering the market that's got in WA, maybe that's something we do a bit more research on and be a bit more specific, because I just found that, hence why I brought it up tonight, because I found that a very interesting. Yeah. And CoreLogic are not, their information is very it's very reliable. So,
and they're independent as well, so they've got no interest whatsoever in So I'm not suggesting that they would.
No.
Information.
Yep. Oh, here we go. Perth. No, it is saying. Yeah, it's saying the national is up 1.9 to 13.5. So for the month, it's up 1.9. Annually, it's up 13.5. In Perth, up 0.2%, and the annual is up 9.8%. I think we need to do some research on that, because it's saying Adelaide's 13.9, and then Melbourne is 7.7. So Melbourne, we're just above Melbourne, which I find hard to believe.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Shall we talk interest rates?
I know you do.
Is it too early? Is it too early for that?
No. We've got to keep moving. We've already done 30 minutes.
Okay. So, interest rates and stamp duty, I mean, they're both very, very big topics, and probably for different reasons at the moment. So I don't have anything, any revelation about either of them. But what I would say is that, so interest rates is something that, with our market coming out of COVID the way that it did in April and May last year, like it came out of the blocks as if we're at the Greyhounds and suddenly the gates open and it just went bang, and then it never really stopped. It just continued in WA. It just continued to go at just a blistering pace, just like the Greyhounds do go around the track. And then, like you said, there were other parts of the country that then started to go and even overtake that level of growth and activity that we had. And that largely primarily consists of Sydney, but then I think Darwin and Hobart as well, like what you refer to. And so that then, in my mind, I was sitting there looking at when we got to the middle of last year, and then definitely as we approached the end of the year, I was talking about interest rates, basically saying, the RBA has said that there's no chance that there's going to be any interest rate rises before 2024, bearing in mind that when I was talking about interest rates, this is at the end of 2020, but I was looking at this ridiculous level of growth that we had. We've got a mining boom obviously happening here in WA. House prices are going through the roof. The lending conditions or restrictions are getting a little bit easier, as in they're starting to lend more money, lending up to 95% again. Something's going to have to change, because our money is very, very cheap, and probably way too cheap. And so there's got to be an interest rate shift. But the RBA then continued through Christmas and early this year, and even right now is still saying unlikely. They've shifted their terminology. Initially, they said no chance that there'll be a shift in official interest rates before 2024. But now they've actually shifted their terminology from no chance, that they've now changed it to unlikely. So, I think in the RBA statement for this current month, it also said something about possible. So they're starting to change their language a bit. The economists are absolutely predicting that there will be interest rate changes as early as 2023. And I also think that the banks are actually factoring in, and what's a really good guide always is that 5-year fixed rate. And we know about 4 or 5 months ago, the banks changed both their 4 and 5-year fixed rate and started to increase those, because I think the banks can see what's coming. Our real estate market was just getting way, way too hot. Maybe it's going to calm down a little bit now, but it was getting way, way too hot. And, we did start seeing, irrespective of the Reserve Bank, we started to see the major banks actually start to increase those fixed interest rates, the 4 and 5 year terms, by as much as 20 or 25 basis points, because they don't want to hang themselves out to dry when the Reserve Bank increases the rate. So I guess my only point with that, mate, is that, we spoke of this pretty much 12 months ago when our market started to get this massive level of hyperactivity, I'd call it. And now we're 12 months down the track, and I guess the prediction of there absolutely has to be a shift in official interest rates before 2024. I think we're really seeing that now. And whether it's 2023 or in fact maybe it'll be the very end of 2022, but I'm sure it's going to be a lot sooner than what they initially said.
Yeah, you say that, and then there was a reference to the Council of Financial Regulators. Now, the Council of Financial Regulators includes the Reserve Bank. It includes ASIC, which is the Australian Securities Investment Commission, and the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, and also Treasury. and they're one of the articles that I read, or one of the things that I was reading or saw or heard or whatever, was that their reference was that the investment market still hasn't, they're not overly concerned about that at the moment. It's starting to make progress, but it's not a concern. And they don't feel, as much as the residential market has increased, they don't think it's of concern, because the big issue, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I'm just an observation, with reading all the different observations, listening to everybody. You listen to David Koch, for example, on Sunday. Whenever I hear something about a housing thing, Jude calls me downstairs, and I have a quick listen to what these people are experts, probably far more expert than what you or I are. But it's just an interesting observation to hear everyone's thoughts, and yet you know, people are making all these observations, but as I say, the Council of Financial Regulators and being the Reserve Bank in particular, they are still holding fast with regard to the fact that, I mean, if it is end of 23 or beginning of 2024, so be it. But I'm not. I suppose there is still plenty of talk and plenty sort of said, besides the economists, to suggest that the market's probably going to the interest rates, they're not rushing it. They don't see there's need to at the moment. They're not overly concerned, which is surprising. But their general chatter is saying this. So we watch this space, I suppose, and maybe we try and find a guest who knows a bit more on that sphere that can give their thoughts on that. Maybe that's a.
I just don't know, TV, how they can be so certain that they can say categorically in the next 2.5 years they're not going to increase official, like 2.5 years. We're not talking 6 months, or we're not even talking 18 months. They're saying in the next 2.5 years, categorically, will not be shifting interest rates. I don't know how they do it. And to be honest with you, I just don't think anyone's that good. Like, what indicators can they have that are so certain that there won't be an interest rate rise in 2.5 years? The other thing that I'd say is that what I know that they do is they look at the spread of debt, and they classify the debt into high risk debt and obviously low risk debt. And if they're...
I forgot my bell.
That your cowbell. I want you to ring that bell every time you say the word article.
Or reading, yes.
Yeah. But, what was I going to say? So they do look at the type of debt. So they look at a high risk or the high interest debt, like credit cards and personal loans and all that sort of stuff. So they probably do feel a lot more comfortable that most of this lending is for housing. And if the housing market's going up, then maybe they don't feel that their risk position is that bad. But then they also look at the level of saving that people are doing as well. So I understand, you know, there's lots of things that go into it. But to make a firm call 2.5 years out and say absolutely not, I think it was always crazy talk.
Investment market in WA, in Western Australia, it's got to be an opportunity. I mean, we talked about it before. You talked about affordability. You've had a chat to a few of the boys. Give it to me. So, tell me what's going on.
What we've seen in probably like during the earlier part of last year, through the COVID period, and probably 12 months after that, we did actually see a number of investors. There were more investors selling their investment properties than there were investors buying any investment properties. And the reason for that is over the last 4 or 5 years, people's properties didn't go up in value. The rental market wasn't what it is today. And also interest rates wasn't what they are today as well. So there's a number of investors out there that just wanted their properties to recover in value so that they can clear their debt, and basically that's it. They've had enough. So they were offloading their properties, and either those properties were going to owner-occupiers, first home buyers, and only a very small portion of those properties were actually going to investors. What we've seen in the last 3 months, though, and as early as yesterday, I was sitting in a real estate agent's office that had a property. It was a 2-bedroom unit, I think, and very, very attractive, I guess, to the investor market. And he had 6 offers on it. Was it 6 offers? No, maybe it was 4 offers on this property, of which 3 of the offers were New South Wales buyers wanting to buy the property sight unseen. And in the end, the Perth-based or the WA-based buyer took themselves out of the race, and the 3 New South Wales buyers bid for it and pushed it a bit above reserve, and one of them obviously ended up buying the property, and that was solely for investment purposes. So, and I'm sure that's only one example, TV, but I really think that over the last couple of months, as demonstrated by the amount of lending in the investor market, supported by the stats, I think some stats that you just mentioned, we've seen an increase in investment property lending, and I'm actually hearing and seeing the demand out there for investors outside of WA that are wanting to invest in WA. And if I'm not mistaken, I think quite a few of them actually target you to work on their behalf to help them out with that local WA knowledge that you've got.
Yes, I have, and it's interesting with regard to that. And I had a chat only a couple of hours ago prior to going on the show to a client who has had some people from the East Coast selling their property, and we're not talking about in Perth CBD. In fact, we're not even talking at a major regional centre. But there's a lot going on in WA, and there's already projects going on that don't necessarily have the high profile that we read about always. And there's some stuff happening east of us. I'm talking about east, not east of WA, but the eastern part of WA, where there's some serious projects being addressed, not just up in the Pilbara, but also east of Geraldton and that area. And certainly some of my clients that I'm talking to, we're not just talking about the residential market. They are looking beyond the residential market. And of course, because of these projects, people are then looking at opportunities. Businesses are looking at opportunities to maybe to house their staff. There may be a situation where they're looking for sites that will suit them to set up as like camps for their staff and things of that nature. So you've got those in the transport industry, you've got those in all the various other industries that are associated with mining, etc. And then, of course, don't forget, we are, with the weather we're having, we're entering a possibility of a massive, massive grain season. And as we had Chad Smith on last week, Chaddy, how good was he last week? He was fabulous guest.
Loved it.
Great stuff. I had a bit of feedback with him, and his story about the cyclone was fabulous to hear someone that's firsthand of what he experienced, what he's going through. But he confirmed that last week with regard to the commodity prices, and sheep, etc. So livestock and the prices. So all those things have a part. Then, of course, people with the lockdowns that are going on, for example, in New South Wales, some of those people turning around and going, you know what? Maybe we look at an opportunity. And this is where we get back to a sea change. Is it just investors, or is it actually people looking for a sea change / tree change?
Yeah. I would have thought it's probably both. It's normally pretty easy to pick the sort of property that people are after as to what their motivation is. And particularly of this, I was thinking about this before. That one example that I mentioned to you when I was sitting in the real estate agent's office yesterday, and these 3 Sydney or New South Wales buyers were all after this one investment property. These guys are happy to buy the property sight unseen. They haven't even been to WA. In fact, they can't actually get to WA at the moment. But these days with technology, they can see the sales evidence. They can see the competing products. There's video tours. There's Matterport. There's all the photos and everything. And at the end of the day, how much do you physically need to see of a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit? So they're comfortable in what it is that they're buying. But also from an investment point of view, they probably don't need to see it. They can see the location, they can see the number of properties that are in the complex. And for them, if it's purely an investment-based decision, they're looking at the numbers. They're looking at how much do I have to pay, what sort of a rental income am I going to expect, and obviously what's my interest rate going to be. The numbers just stack up for a good investment versus someone that is looking for a sea or a tree change, like you said, TV. They're definitely interested in the numbers, but if they're looking at a lifestyle change for themselves, it's probably a lot more important that they can actually get to the place and see it and smell it and touch it and try and live it a bit to get a better idea for the decision that they're about to make.
Yep.
What are you doing? Are you reading another article?
I'm trying to find one that I've got. I'm trying to find one that I had, but I'll look for it in a moment. But yeah, no, it's interesting, and I think that price has got to have a big influence on it. It's affordability, our market, and of course, I think the fact is we're super lucky at what we're experiencing when it comes to COVID. And you know, and I know, friends of ours and someone that we're both close to, that locked away, and they are locked away. They're in a small unit, and only one person out of the house at any one time to go shopping. They can't go shopping together. That's we have a whinge because we do it for 3 days. So it's a challenge at the moment, and I think that's where people are finding it somewhat difficult. But and I think we've really covered that with regard to sea change and tree change and investment, that there are still people identifying WA, and not just Perth WA, but WA as a whole, and looking at opportunity to buy with the intention of coming to live. And that's, there's no doubting that happened. And I wonder how much that will change when the New South Wales borders, for example, are opened up and things do change.
Yeah.
When people turn around and go, you know what, I've had enough of this. Let's get fair income. The price is right. We can sell our property. We can. We've got a quid in our pocket. We can go and buy a property here in WA, and we'll have some change to go and live a reasonable life, or maybe buy a small business, or whatever the case would be.
Yeah, and I think it really is a catalyst of what's going on over there, because I think it's safe to say with the vaccine rollout that COVID, might be something that we have to live with. But if we work on the assumption that most people are going to go ahead and get vaccinated, so therefore most people aren't going to be contracting COVID in 2022 and 2023. So life to an extent can go back to normal. Right now, though, there's that catalyst of, geez, how do we get out of here? And it might, and it already has, make people make some decisions to be out of the higher density areas, whether that be Sydney and moving out of Sydney altogether, moving into the regional parts or the western parts of Sydney, or even here, what we've seen in WA, where people during this COVID time have left Perth, they've moved north, they've moved south, they've continued to run their businesses or commute to their jobs, or find new jobs, all because they don't want to be in the higher density areas where the that initial thing of community transmission is obviously the risk of that is greater. So I think most people can see that the COVID thing isn't going to be 2, 3, 4 years down the track, but it certainly has been a catalyst for people to think differently than what they historically have, and I think we're actually seeing that reflected in their housing decisions.
Well, the next point that I'm going to raise is this article that I read.
An article?
Yes.
Really? That must have been the 14th one this afternoon.
Oh, no. I do work.
Did you do a couple of crosswords?
Yeah, no, I don't do crosswords. I do Sudoku. I'm a bit of a Sudoku fan. Always been a bit of a figures fan. Stressed in the City was in the Australian magazine. Whether you're planning to retire or craving a slower paced lifestyle, perhaps it's time for a tree or sea change to one of these beautiful Aussie towns. And amongst those beautiful Aussie towns, was they referred to different places, towns under 2 hours from a capital city, and they referred to Queensland and Kincumber in New South Wales, population 52,900, medium house price 890,000. Beechworth in Victoria, medium house price 635,000. Population 3,859.
Wow.
Right. Robertson in New South Wales, 900,000. Population 1,865. So this is what we're talking about. This is not in Sydney. This is little communities. And this is what we're talking about, the affordability in WA. Darwin and Northern Territory is obviously a place to be. And then towns under 4 hours from a capital city. Young in New South Wales, population 7,000. Bundaberg in Queensland, 317,000, population 50,000. Port Augusta in South Australia, and then we get down to towns that are as far from a capital city as one could possibly want. Geraldton, WA. If you're a windsurfer, moving to Geraldton is a no-brainer. It's the windsurfing and kite surfing capital of Australia. It means you need to be okay with the odd breeze to live there. Well, it's on the coast. It's also incredibly temperate, so no cold gusts. It's pristine. White sand is the stuff of postcards. It's home to a vibrant cafe, culture and art scene, and it's 4.5-hour drive north of Perth, or a quick 50-minute Qantas flight. Medium house price, $257,000. Population, 37,648. I found that really interesting, of all the things that in an article that suddenly they plucked the town that I'm originally from, and where I have a business. But I found that really interesting to read an article of that nature, and it identified, when you compare what they're identifying in other states comparing to WA, and we talk about even when it comes to Perth. I mean, buying something in Perth is cheaper than some of those places.
When I moved to Geraldton in very end of 2008, and even before then, I did some work up in Gero. And even to this day, I look at the prices for housing in Geraldton, and far out, it is just the best value for money anywhere that I know of up and down the WA coast. It's really, really good value for money. Town is town. It's got its issues. You know, it could use some more infrastructure, and it can, basically that, and it can certainly use an injection of tourism and all that sort of stuff. But so far as if you've got a small business or if you've got a decent job, the price of living there and the cost of housing, it's very, very good value for your buck. And I don't live there anymore. I haven't lived there for 4 years. Which seems to have gone quick, but it still remains as just a very, very affordable, great value for money place to live.
Stamp duty. I know you've been wanting to talk about it. Come on,
mate,
give it to me.
The stamp duty thing is just a whinge, really, because it's just a one-sided argument, and the one-sided argument with several options or several solutions that are being put forward by the real estate industry, by the Chamber of Commerce, by the banks, by every part of our economy, excepting the government, and that's why it's a one-sided argument, because stamp duty, reducing stamp duty, or some sort of, what's the word? Not rejuvenation. Just changing the way stamp duty is done, the way that it's paid, whether it's paid all at the start, all at the end, whether it's paid off on interest-free terms or in tranches or what it like. There's so many different ways. It's not that it just needs to be reduced. But from the state government's point of view, it's a very, very easy revenue raiser. And that's why it's a one-sided argument, because the state government can hear every single argument, every single option. It's not a case of, well, come to us with some options as to how the state government can still earn revenue or the same amount of revenue from it, but come to us with some options as to how we can maintain revenue whilst it will ease the burden on people that are having to pay the stamp duty when they're changing their housing situations. And I know via the Real Estate Institute and via Chamber of Commerce as well, Urban Development Institute, Housing Institute of Australia, it goes on and on. We're laughing at.
I've got someone's just sent us a chat. One of our regulars, one JB, but I'll tell you in a minute. Keep going.
Okay. So what? Is he probably having a laugh at me having a rant? But yeah, I'm having a bit of a rant.
No, it's not. No.
Oh, okay. Anyway, there's not really too much more for me to say on it, other than the state government has just got a very, very stubborn position. And initially that was no. Now it appears to be, oh yeah, okay, well, tell us a bit more, but still no. And they're getting every single option thrown at them as to the different ways that stamp duty can be restructured. But we're getting nowhere. We're literally getting, we're not getting some traction. It's getting a little bit more airtime, but we're literally getting nowhere. And so therefore my talk on stamp duty is just a bit of a rant, TV. there's probably not a lot of new information in there. It's just easy money, and a lot of it for the government.
Yeah, and you would think, to be honest, you would think that they would sort of be proactive on it, on the basis that being very, we've had a change with the proportion of GST from the mining side of it. We've got a very strong and booming economy because of iron ore prices. I had a very interesting question asked of me of a friend of mine, an investor in Melbourne. I've looked after him and been a friend of mine for some 20 plus years, been a very good client of my business, Champion Bay, but he always sits down and hadn't had a chat for a while. His question to me was, and this is someone who's very sharp and is very aware of what's going on, not just in WA, but across the board and around Australia. And his comment was, Tony, can you explain to me and tell me why the Midwest region and WA as a whole is not progressing when iron ore prices are at an all-record high? GST has been adjusted as WA have required from the federal government levels, and yet we still pay probably one of the highest stamp duties in Australia, and we don't seem to be advancing in any way with house shortages, etc. in WA. Can you explain to me why that's happening? Now, this is something that's very sharp. I had another conversation. This is all in the space of about 2 days in the last 4 or 5 days. And I had another conversation with a very influential developer friend of mine over east, who I look after all his affairs here, all their affairs here in WA, and when it comes to property matters. And the comment was, the conversation with a lot of people looking at investment, we're talking about investment at the upper level, so commercial shopping centres, etc. Their concern is that WA just gets carried away with price and it becomes unsustainable. That's the comment that he made with regard to the conversations with the different wheelers and dealers that he's associated with. And that's the comment that he made to me as recently as about 3 or 4 days ago. Friday, in fact, he made that comment.
Where is he based?
He's based in South Australia, but he does a lot of work in Victoria and WA.
Okay, because I was going to say, people get carried away in WA and it's unsustainable. Well, maybe I'm getting all defensive of WA, but look at Sydney. Like, you look at the sustainability of what's going on over there.
They're saying in a comparison with regard to what we do, it flies through the roof, and we don't seem to be. What he's saying is they don't feel as though it's sustainable. We don't get to a level where it's sustainable.
Yeah.
We don't have the population like Sydney. We don't get the demand we get like Sydney, right?
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is that the marketplace, which is proven, the guys are then relocating their businesses because it's not sustainable with the rents and whatever that they're charging or what they're trying to do here in WA. I have said to him that I wouldn't mind getting him on board to have a chat, and that he's a super busy person, but it was just an interesting conversation and other people's observation, not suggesting he's right or wrong, but just that's people's opinions.
The other thing I was going to say, TV, I mentioned that this whole stamp duty thing really is just a one-sided argument, or it's a one-horse race, really, or there's only one side of the equation that's got anything to talk about or contribute to it. That's not entirely true right this minute, because if one of the reasons why we're looking to reduce stamp duty is to stimulate the housing market, well, the government's answer or response to that is, well, right now the real estate market's doing just fine. We don't need to reduce stamp duty to stimulate our market, because look at what we've been able to do over the last 12 months. So that's a very short-term position, a bit narrow-minded, but I'm sure it's a card that they're playing in their hand at the moment. But still very, very frustrating. We need to look longer term. And the other thing being is that initially there was talk of a reduction in stamp duty. Now the talk is shifted away from just reducing stamp duty, but more so changing the way that stamp duty actually gets paid, so that it's more affordable and can maybe be paid over a period of time, as opposed to the initial stumbling block that it is at the moment.
Did you know what July is very good for?
Non-drinking?
No. Well, it's dry July, yes. But the other thing being is, my pop always used to tell me, this is the time of the year that you start pruning your roses. Did you know that?
Oh, this is your gardening bit, eh?
Yep. This is the little gardening segment. I'm just going to put TVs. Just call me. No, you better not do that. I'll get into trouble. But there's one of my favourite gardening personalities that I love following on ABC, Sabrina Hahn. You ever heard Sabrina? I'm a big fan of Sabrina's. Anyway, but my pop used to be a mad gardener, and he taught me a lot. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to be a bit different. I'm going to put my little penny's worth in. This is time for the roses. This is when you start pruning. Go hard. It gives them an opportunity to refresh and get going again. And you will have some magnificent roses starting to fire up come September, August. It's just thereabouts, yeah. You don't have to do anything too much with the roses. You can never be too hard on them. Cut them back by about half and away you go, and you'll get some magnificent growth, fresh foliage and some beautiful flowers. There you go.
I just, believe it or not, TV, I just read an article. I just read a little article. You know what it said?
I just thought I'd tell you that. I thought I've got something to give here. I've got something to offer. Hey,
little article that I just read is a little article and said, "You're an idiot."
I listened. And my wife had just come back on the chat line and said, "Woohoo, go OD." She's agreeing with you. I can't believe it. Hey, listen, JB's just sent a message earlier on too. OD wasn't stamp duty one of those state-based taxes that was supposed to disappear when GST was introduced? And I think he's right. I think that wasn't that one of the ones. But the other
and
the
if
other
I'm
comment,
not mistaken, is that like almost 20 years, bang on 20 years on almost on the dot? Was not 1st of July 2001?
Something like that.
Or thereabouts?
2000, whatever it was.
20 years.
Time
and it's still disappearing.
Yeah. The other comment he's made, the banks are reporting credit card debt declining significantly. But he said they'll say, don't worry about the banks, they'll be okay. Plenty of branches they can close to save costs based on customer choice and digital technology uptake. I think that was a tongue-in-cheek comment. Tongue-in-cheek, you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. Good to hear from you, JB. Glad to see your footy team doing well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going on Thursday. We're going Thursday. We're going to watch the game. They're playing the Dockers on Thursday here in Freo. Because that was the Sunday game. It's now changed
is JB in town to go to that game with you?
Yeah, the girls are on holidays. So
excellent.
He and his family, because his girls play football. So he's coming down, and we're not going together, but I'm sure we'll catch up for a little frothy at some point in time. So
excellent.
That's the plan. Hey, did you see the article? I
did. I told you. I read it before. I think I told you what it said, didn't I? It said you're an idiot.
That, I thought, here we go again. But there was an article in the paper, and I'm trying to damn find it. I wouldn't believe it. I might have to keep it next week. I've just looked at the time. No, we better do the if question because I'm running out of time rapidly. So the if question, we'll make sure I'll keep that up for next week. We did a bit of a sport. We've covered a bit today. We've done quite well.
Bit of gardening?
JB said yes, he'll definitely be there. He's going to be covered in blue and white on Thursday night. So there you go. As long as the weather's not as bad as it was last night, my God. So the if question, there was an article.
Was there really?
You got to do some research.
TVs and idiots.
If I didn't do the heavy lifting, who would? I mean, God, you're too busy. I just sit around and read articles. So there was an article read with regard to lamb is going to come the year 2050. I'm not sure whether I'll still be here in 2050. That's how many years is that? That's 29 years away. Oh, no, I reckon I'll be around. I'll be 94 then. 94, going strong.
You'll be a little plant in your back garden.
No, 94. I'll be sitting there doing the episode 660 with OD.
And anyway, you're still reading out the disclaimer, saying that word context.
Anyway, they are suggesting that lamb will be $100 in 2050, and we will be, in actual fact, changing our diet. And we'll be, come 2050, this is true, this was an article I read I can't remember where I saw it, but anyway, Dietitians Australia National Conference, they had a national conference, and they're suggesting that fungi, seaweed, and insects will regularly be on the dining tables by 2050. So my if question to you, if in 2050 you're around, and you should be, considering your age, you'll be 74 then.
Will I?
And I'll be, you'll be 74 in 2050.
How old will you be?
I'll be 94. There's 20 years difference between you and I, so I'll be 94, you'll be 74. And we're going, Anyway, so your daughters by that stage will have grandchildren, and you'll be there having dinner with your daughters and your grandkids. If they are going to serve you up dinner and they can't afford lamb, because they're saying lamb and beef will only be eaten on Christmas because that's when it'll be a special occasion. When the kids serve you up dinner...
Is there a question coming here, mate? This is meant to be an if question.
If they serve you up dinner, what insect would you prefer to be served up for dinner in 2050?
What insect?
Yes. What would be your preferred insect?
A cricket.
A cricket? Okay.
Yeah. And just interestingly, before I ask you what insect you'd like to eat, but I saw on Shark Tank a couple of weeks ago, but it was an old one. There was this girl, and she had made up her own invention of using insects and converting the insects into basically an insect wheat flour thing. And then that became the base for foods. It was... I think the Sharks actually invested in her because they actually believed and it was a proven business and she needed to expand or whatever, but it was using insects as a flour to create food, so as a food source. So I think it actually is a real thing that you've read there in your article. Mate, what would you like to eat as an insect?
Well, I've seen, and I've got them in my garden, these whopping great big grasshoppers. They are huge. And my dog chases them and catches them, and he eats them, and he thoroughly enjoys them. And I reckon they've got they definitely got plenty of good size about them. So I think I'll go the grasshopper at this stage. One of those big, thick, heavy ones. Yep. So there you go. Grasshopper. Yeah. Hey, listen, we've really digressed tonight. We really have digressed. For those people that are listening to the podcast tomorrow, don't worry, we haven't gone mad. We just enjoy ourselves. Have
you got any more articles to run through? Any more articles?
I have, but we haven't got time. But we keep on going over the way we're going. We've been fabulous.
Time for a crossword? Can we do a crossword?
Will you stop it? I'm trying to finish up. So been a pleasure. For those that follow us, thank you. For those that listen, fabulous. Please subscribe. Please share what we do. We're not a money-making exercise. We're just here to try and benefit and focus on WA property. You can get access to us via Facebook. You can get access via Instagram, Twitter. We've got, what else have we got? We haven't got a LinkedIn account. YouTube. So if you want to be a part of us or you want to send us questions, you've got all sorts of avenues. Have a great week. Go the Cats on Thursday. Should be a great game for all your sporting teams. Congratulations to all our winners during the week. And for all of you, if you're buying property, take care. Don't forget to get that independent advice. Enjoy. Please travel safe in this weather. School holidays, enjoy. But if you're traveling when you come home, please stay safe. Look forward to seeing you all again next week. And goodbye from him and goodbye from us, I reckon. Cheers, mate. Take care.
Ciao.